So when I was 9 years old, my family moved to a foreign land. I didn't know it at the time, but that one event would forever set the course of the rest of my life. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was a hot and sunny winter's day, February 1986. And we were flying over, I was peering out the window, coming over from Lausanne, Switzerland to Los Angeles, California. I remember looking out the window in this city that just kept going and going and going. And I remember thinking in that moment, things would never be the same. And things weren't easy for me when I showed up in LA, because you can imagine, 1986, Swiss Lederhosen boy. I did not fit in with the surfers and the skaters of Southern California. Now, to complicate matters, I was kind of a nerd. And this is, by the way, back when, well, before it was cool to be a nerd. I was such a nerd that the other nerds made fun of me, okay? Just give you an idea. And then what was going on at home, well, that was a whole nother story. See, my dad is a mad scientist and an inventor. My mother, teacher, artist, toy designer. In certain ways, I had a charmed childhood. I mean, can you imagine waking up each day and not knowing whether my day was going to be a science experiment or an art project? Incredible amount of creative freedom. Yet, growing up in that household, I wasn't taught how to fit in or belong anywhere. And so this became a driving theme of my life. And through adolescence and teenage years, looking around and just going, this doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I couldn't find myself in the world that I was in. So I started to create my own world. It led me to anthropology and to becoming an entrepreneur. And I became really curious about what was happening in our culture, our society. A lot of anthropologists, they study the past. They go and dig up ruins and look at artifacts. Or they go and study an indigenous tribe halfway around the world. Yet, if you look around today, we as entrepreneurs, we are culture creators. We have the opportunity to build and shape and define culture. If you have a family, a household with kids, you are shaping the culture of your family. Right? Everywhere we turn, culture is being shaped and defined. And this just fascinated me. And I started to study this more and more. And I became an entrepreneur. I had some early successes, and I had some failures and disappointments. In 2002, I met a guy by the name of Paul Costello. Now, Paul was you could say, a heretic sage. Seminary dropout, a social worker turned activist who taught narrative. And one of the things that Paul taught me was that the stories that we tell shape our world. Now, why is that important? Well, you're all hearing a lot about storytelling these days, right? And it's understandable, because everywhere you turn, we're going through reinvention. How many of you are in the midst of reinventing your career or redefining and repositioning the business that you work for? We see this everywhere we turn, institutions trying to redefine themselves. Speaks to the power of storytelling. The challenge is that for most of us, we are swimming in a sea of stories. We don't know which way to look, up, down, and all around, and make sense of the story we're in, much less the story that we want to create. So what I want to share with you today are three essential stories that every entrepreneur needs to know. The O stands for origin. The C for customer. And the P is for product. Three stories: your origin story, your customer story, and your product story. So why is an origin story so darn important? You see, as entrepreneurs, we all share the same common story. We do. Now, you might not have been a nerd the way I was a nerd, but I bet you've experienced some level of disillusionment, some level of frustration about the world around you. What makes you an entrepreneur is that you don't just sit there. You go, you know, this doesn't quite make sense. I think we could do it better. What if? What if we tried this? Or what if we created that? You are literally creating a new world. But it comes from a place of frustration. It comes from a place of, this isn't quite right. I've always been deeply struck by Peter Drucker's definition of entrepreneurship, because he literally breaks it down in 2 words, 2-part formula. He says entrepreneurship is innovation plus marketing. It's pretty brilliant. Right? Well, it starts by seeing, you know, something's not quite right, I could do it better. That's innovation. And then, guess what? You got to figure out a way to get others to care about it. That's marketing. Both of those are essentially storytelling exercises. So, how do you get in touch with your own origin story? Think about superheroes. Who's your favorite superhero? Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, some funny dude in tights. We often forget there are few superheroes that are born superheroes. Instead, you become a superhero based on the circumstances that you're in and the choices that you make in the face of those circumstances. So becoming an entrepreneur is also a choice. And the reason I share this story with you is that as an entrepreneur, you may have had some hard times. You might have taken some licks recently. Your struggle and adversity is actually what gives you permission to become an entrepreneur. But you have to get in touch with understanding what is your deeper motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because the world also wants and needs to know that. I became so passionate about storytelling because I felt lost in translation. I was a fish out of water. And I saw, growing up in this world of unbounded creativity, how easy any of us can get lost in our ideas. Let's talk about customer in that story real quick. Martin Greenfield. Martin Greenfield is a legendary American custom tailor. He came over from Europe, Holocaust survivor, got off the boats, started working in the factories as a tailor out in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He made his way up the ranks, eventually bought the factory, and today, Martin Greenfield is known as the tailor to our presidents, to celebrities and sports stars. I had the opportunity to meet Martin Greenfield a couple months back. And well, I'll give you some context. Because you can imagine going to meet a dude like that, a little intimidating. You guys should know, as Simone mentioned, I'm colorblind, which is really just my excuse for being fashionably challenged. Okay? So the idea of meeting Martin Greenfield, pretty intimidating. But I went to meet him, and this guy is like the hoarse whisperer of clothes. I mean, he sees things nobody sees. And he measured me up and down, and the things he understood about my body. But the incredible thing about it was that he studied and looked at my body without judgment. And it's something we often forget when we're telling our customer story. We can't come from a place of judgment. It has to come from a place of empathy. And I don't have to tell the guys here in the room, when it comes to buying clothes, a lot of us, geez, I want to go to the department store once a year, buy everything I need, and I'm done. Right? It's an anxiety-provoking activity. What you need to think about for each of these three stories, whether it's the origin story or the customer story, is what's going on down here. This is emotional content. It's unbounded. It's a deep ocean. And here's the thing about emotional content. We're all afraid of it. We stay away from it. We've been taught not to go there. You don't talk about your emotions. So we don't talk about it. As businesses, as entrepreneurs, we don't think to talk about the emotions that actually drive our work, much less the emotions of what's really going on in the life of our customer. What are they feeling? What are they most worried about? That's the story you need to tell. If we look then at the product story, well, I mentioned my dad earlier, and my dad continues to be the mad scientist and inventor. One of his recent inventions is called the Go Fit burger. It's a pretty cool thing. It's the holy grail of veggie burgers. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is the holy grail of veggie burgers? Imagine eating a veggie burger, except when you bite into it, and you're tasting it, you truly, honest to God, believe it is a beef burger. It tastes like it, it feels like it, you can't tell it apart. In fact, that's the only problem with the product. Some people eat it, and are there any vegetarians here in the room? Have you ever eaten something and you swear there is meat in that thing, and you call over the manager and you're like, "Excuse me, manager, I ordered this vegetarian. I cannot believe that you brought this out and served this to me. Not only do I want my money back, I'm going to Yelp about this. I mean, I'm up in arms." This happens. Now, so when they introduced their product, they had a bit hard time selling the story at first, because they were just selling, hey, it's a high-protein, low-fat burger. What the heck does that mean? They were afraid to call themselves a veggie burger. Why? Well, what experience have we had with veggie burgers? Right? Tastes like cardboard. It's stale. We all have this predisposition of disappointment when you think of a veggie burger. So why would you want to associate yourself with that? So this is one of the challenges that we all face as entrepreneurs and innovators, because when you're doing something that's new and different, you're moving away from something. But we're often afraid to actually own it. We're afraid to actually say, yeah, no, this is who we are. And you can't create your product unless you understand your customer And you can't connect with your customer unless they believe that you get their world. So you'll notice there's some spaces here. This is what unlocks your ability as an entrepreneur to build a business and to tell a story that changes the world. Okay? It starts by getting in touch with your origin story, by understanding what really drives and motivates you. Because keep in mind, your audience, no matter who they are, you know what they're thinking? This is what your audience is thinking, doesn't matter what you're selling. Are you just trying to sell me more crap? Or do you give a crap and want to change the world, my world, for the better? That is what people are wondering. Right? Are you selling crap or do you give a crap? Don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with selling. We're all selling something. What's important in that statement is, do you believe in what you're selling? Do you believe that what you are selling can fundamentally transform the lives of the people you're trying to serve? That's the question. And you have to get in touch with what part in your own life, in work, makes you bleed the pain of your customer. Because it's only from that place that you can truly create a product. So your origin story, guess what? Requires some vulnerability. Your customer story requires empathy. And the product story requires truth. It means you need to really go after a desire that your customer has that's been unmet. This emotional content over here. All of your answers are down here. One of the ways to think about this, if you're struggling to connect with your customer, is lower your waterline. Lower the waterline, which means you need to share more emotion. Now, I want to leave you with this. I imagine as you see this, there's a lot of depth and texture here for you to unpack. What's important for you to remember is that we all look to find ourselves in each other's story. This is what we do as human beings. We're always looking to find ourselves in each other's story. And when we find it, we fall in love with that person, we fall in love with that brand, because we feel that somebody finally understands us. Somebody gets us. The key to this is that your customer has to be the hero of the story. This is the hardest lesson all of us have as entrepreneurs, because our origins, man, that stuff is personal. You don't know what I've had to go through to get here today. Right? We're so invested, but we then forget that it's not about us. It's about the customer. So I encourage you, my hope is that you begin to think about how can you tell your story in service to your audience? Because the holy grail of storytelling is when your audience can see themselves in your own story. When you do that, the need to persuade, to convince, or sell them on anything disappears. Thank you.